there's John. Okay.
There's John. So John, he leads our discussions.
Which discussion doesn't he lead? I'm in like 3 other ones that he leads. I'm like, he's just like a professional. He professional. Just jumps on.
Okay,
like,
stop it. Stop it.
I'm like, this is the 6th time I've been on something with John leading something. Shoot, I should have known.
You will see me tomorrow.
Yes, I will. I know it. I look forward to it. Always good seeing you, sir.
Good seeing all you all as well. Do we have more people coming on? Jessica?
I didn't do an RSVP or anything like that, so I'm not sure. It's kind of just come. The 2 people that I had for the panel are here, so.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm going to kind of just step back and let the panelists kind of lead the discussion. Is that what we were wanting to do today, or how do you want me to? Okay,
yeah.
I'll just step back and let them kind of lead the discussion on this today.
Ooh.
Okay. Well, maybe we should like introduce ourselves a little bit. We have a lot of new faces.
Okay, let's do that. I'll start with myself.
Okay.
I'm John Goldrich. I'm a counselor here in the community, as well as at the university, and I'm part of a group that founded Parenting Across Color Lines several years ago. So for all of you who I don't know, welcome.
Awesome.
Okay.
I'll just pick people so that they're in order for me. Sorry. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Sarah Terrano. I am the mother of 3 mixed race children, biological. The oldest being 21, the next in line is 20, and the youngest is 16. So I've been around the block a few times with doing stuff with them as far as race relation things.
Okay. Lena, sorry, I say it wrong. I'm so sorry. Oh.
Lana, you're on.
I got it. Okay. Lana Wilkins. We have 2 kids. Hannah is 8 and Daniel is 6. Both adopted and African American.
Graydon and Jessica.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I went wrong. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
We're Graydon and Jessica. We are first-time foster parents, and we have 3 Black foster girls, ages 6, 9, and 10. And then we also have 3 boys of our own, ages 7, 11, and almost 15.
Oh my.
So yeah, we're just here to learn, and our girls have been with us for about 11 months now.
Awesome. Okay, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm Michelle and my husband Dale Johannes. And we have 2 adopted children. My daughter is Chinese and my son is Ethiopian. So she's 14 and he is 12.
Awesome. Peter?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Ferguson, or Peter Ferguson, as my mom would call me. And then she would throw the middle name in there. So if you get my middle name, my head's going to turn around and I might run. But I am a father of a 19-year-old. She's a freshman in college, biracial mixed race daughter. And excited, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. I also kind of have a number of things in common with some of the things that you all talked about that are foster parents and have adopted. I'm also adopted as well. And so my parents always kind of say, it was one of the things, I was right on the verge. They say you're cuter when you're younger. And they said I was right on the verge to stop being real cute. And so when I got lippy and mouthed off to them or whatever else, they said you were right there when we almost didn't take you. We almost got somebody else. So for those of you in that capacity of doing that, I am greatly appreciative as well, because I know what that means and what that meant to me in my life. So thank you.
Awesome. We're just welcome, Cagney and Sarah. We are introducing ourselves. Felicia, you want to go real quick?
Sure. I'm Felicia Nelson. I am the executive director of the Nebraska Foster and Adopted Parent Association. So Barb and John had asked me to join in on PACL and get that started with them. And it's been wonderful. I am a former foster parent, now just an adoptive parent of a 19-year-old who just finished her first year of college, and she is Asian.
Cagney?
I'm Cagney Tipton. I don't know what you all are saying, but we have 2 adopted kiddos. And we joined PACL 3 years ago, probably, and really enjoy just being able to bounce ideas off people and hear from everybody. And so.
And Sarah?
Which Sarah?
Oh, Haley.
Oh, is it just me?
Sorry,
okay,
sorry.
I was like, is there another Sarah?
No.
Can you guys hear me? I'm having video issues.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, yay. So.
Oh, now we can't. Oh. I think you're muted, Sarah Haley.
Oh, I talked to Jessica.
You're cutting out a little bit. Oh. Okay, hopefully she'll come back soon. And I'm Jessica Shidecki. I am the program coordinator for PACL. And this is Joby, my 2-year-old. And my husband is Nigerian. So we have a biracial child, obviously. Okay, so when she comes back, she can maybe introduce herself. But really, I just wanted to kind of have Pete and Sarah Terrano share a little bit about, they have older children, so I wanted them to share about experiences they've had with their kids and how they have helped them navigate it, and even some things that they might have learned that can help us. Sarah Haley, can you hear us?
Looks like she's connecting.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear us, Sarah? Oh, she says, I don't know what's happening.
Welcome to the world of Zoom.
That was funny.
It's like seeing somebody trapped in a machine.
I know.
I've been
Oh,
where
so
she's
she
at.
can hear us. That's good. Well,
What a
Sarah, do
joy.
you want
Just
to
keep
maybe,
typing. That's fun.
yeah, you can type and tell us who you are. Got it.
Okay, all right.
Awesome. Well, that's a puppy. Well, I just want to welcome all of our new faces and all of our, not old faces, but our current people that come. So let's just go ahead.
Old.
Let's just go ahead and start. Sarah, do you want to start? Sarah Terrano?
Yeah, I will. Hold on. I'm going to tell my kid to get my dogs to stop barking. Can you get them under control for me, please? Or shut my door? Oh, they're barking because a bird hit the window. Okay. So you just shut the door for me. No, she's fine. Thank you. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Okay. I only have one left in the house, so I have to order them around as much as possible. I am, like I said, I have my 3 kids, and mixed race, they're black and white. And I think it was one of those things where when I started dating their dad, we started dating at 17, had our first child, and were married at 19. And stayed together probably a little bit longer than we should have, because it turned more into a combative roommate type situation than anything, because we were just together too young, and that's fine. And we divorced about 5 years ago. So, I mean, the kids had a full family through much of their years. And I mean, that was normal. Mom, dad, growing up, and we live on the south side. And with that, I grew up very sheltered. I went to Catholic schools, or I went out to Waverly. There were not a lot of Black people. There were not a lot of people of any other race that were kind of in my just normal everyday living. And it was one of those things where it started early, where I remember my dad at one point had said, and he grew up in West Virginia, and my dad had once said that my sister and I were not allowed to date Black people. And I was furious with him. I was like, my dad's a racist. I couldn't even speak to him. And then I find out later that no, the reason is because in West Virginia, his basketball team was segregated. They had to take 2 separate buses, and he refused to play. And then one night, one of the basketball players was being beaten by a gang of white guys, and my dad attempted to intervene and ended up with a cracked jaw. He was in the ICU for a while. And so his idea was, and then his sister married somebody who's Black, and they had several attempts on their lives taken through the years. And so I think it got to the point with him where it's like, you know, it's not safe. It's just not a safe way to be. You can't have an interracial relationship and be safe. And so for the longest time, I was like, in my head, even though I knew that, I'm like, that's not true, that people can be safe. This is, you know, at that point, it was like, you know, the 1990s, and I'm sitting here like, no, I'm just, you know, it's on TV. It's normal. And which back then it was so not normal on TV. Even though you'd see every now and again, you'd see an interracial relationship on TV. It was so you look back on it and you want to cringe, because it's so tragic. They stereotype these Black people in the worst ways ever. And in the end, it's like, I think there was an episode with like 90210, and it was just, you know, in the end, they couldn't connect. And it's like, well, I don't want to live in a world where that's the case, because there are going to be many ways that I would not connect. But I think that's where we start having problems, is when we think that we don't have to connect. We don't have the capability of connecting with another race. And a lot of people think that way still. And when we got together and had our kids, immediately started seeing problems with how people were, you know, I would have been followed in the grocery store. And mind you, at the time I was 19 when I had my first. And, but we would get followed in the grocery store, or people would stare. And I had to consciously tell myself that people were staring because my kids were just that damn cute. Like, that there was no other reason that they would be staring at us. But then it gave me a complex, because then I started to think, and I really feel like there's parents out there that still feel this way, that my children had to be perfect. So everything that they wore had to be perfect. It either came from a boutique or it was name brand, and it was spotless at all times. And my mother-in-law used to make a joke. She's like, I've never seen your kids with a stain on their clothing. And I would pack extra clothing to take, because it was just, I never wanted anybody to look at that and say, look at her, she can't even take care of her kids, look how messy they are and how gross they are. And I was trying to address it ahead of time. And then years later, with my sister's kids, and my kids are over at my mom's house playing, and they're out riding bikes, and my sister's boys have no shirts on, eating popsicles, and just living their best life, riding bikes up and down the street. And my kids, who maybe have a little bit of popsicle around their mouth and on their bikes, and all of a sudden a neighbor comes out and yells at my kids, where is your mother? Look at you guys are a mess. And I can hear her. And excuse me. And she was just, and my kids were like, what the heck? And I'm sitting there thinking, my nephews just rode up the street and nothing was said. And she actually even talked to them. And then it was just, but it hit me at that point that there's nothing that I'm going to do that is going to make my children acceptable to certain people. That's just the truth. And I let down a lot that day. And it helped so much because it was so exhausting keeping that sort of appearance up to other people, thinking that my house had to look a certain way and I had to be a certain way because the stereotypes come with it, where people are sitting there, often. I think there was one time I saw somebody at the mall and I had 2 of my kids and she said, oh, they're so cute. Do you know their fathers? And I was just kind of like, wow, okay. This is just instantly what comes to some people's minds, and they don't think that it's rude and they don't think that what they're doing. And I just kind of answered questions and I was quiet with it for a long time. And then I realized that being quiet wasn't going to help my kids and it wasn't going to help anybody else that I'm interacting with. And so it was one of those things where you start having it attack you in every area. And like I said, I grew up so privileged that it took everything else coming at me to realize that how also privileged I was of a stance that I was taking on this, that my kids won't encounter this stuff because I grew up, white privilege, plus I grew up with financial privilege. And so I kind of thought that would kind of protect my kids. And it hasn't in any way. There's no amount of money or status that will protect your children from experiencing racism. And the first time that they experience it is going to be the hardest on the parent who is not of the same race. And because you can't know what they feel, being made fun of in school because you have too many freckles or you stuttered or overweight. Those are things that can change through your life. But being made fun of because of race is never going to go away. And I couldn't comprehend how that made my child feel. And that was also another good step of me understanding that when they told me that, and it broke my heart, but I had to take all of my feelings about it and completely suppress them to my child, because the only thing that mattered right then was how they were feeling. And it never, ever will I tell my kids that this is how they should feel. This is how they should take this information. It even came up today where I was talking to my daughter who's 20 and she needs tires for her car. And I had suggested going to a particular place to go look at tires. And she was like, no, they're just gonna, upcharge me because I'm a girl and because I'm Black. And I'm like, well, I am familiar with the woman tax. That's something that women are familiar with. But I can't tell her, I can say, I'm suggesting that place because to me, it's not a good old boys place. And so I feel comfortable sending you there. But I can't tell her that she can't feel that way if she goes there in this place that I suggested made her feel that way. Or if she doesn't want to. So I think that's kind of one of the important things with raising children, is just to really listen to them and never ever try to tell them that what they're experiencing is inappropriate to any of the situations that they're going through, which can be hard to do because as parents, we want to try and tell our kids, as much as we can. We want to try and tell them that, like, I know how it feels to feel less than, but no matter the case, we can't ever, it's just off limits. In my opinion, it's an off limits topic. And it can be hard when it would be to white parents only to a child who is to a person of color. When you have a child of color, that can be difficult because for us in our house, it was, you can go talk to your dad, like he can try to help you through this a little bit more. And for you guys, that doesn't quite exist. And so you have to have and there was times where my husband was an engineer at the railroads. He traveled a lot. And so there was times when he wasn't around for me to be able to talk to, or they tell the kids to talk to about it. And so it was reaching out to a bigger network of people, reaching out to my in-laws or cousins or anybody else that I could to try and get some perspective on what they were experiencing, or maybe what to say to them, or just even for them to talk to. And that is going to be like a really good anchor to have in your corner when you're kind of going through this, especially as they go through these different ages, because it's going to be different through each age. You know, like my daughter was told she had nappy hair way back in kindergarten, which, tell me how a kindergarten knows what nappy means. I mean, that's something they got from their house. But that started as young as kindergarten. It started when my kids, they went to St. Joe's. And I did that kind of on this idea that, again, this privileged idea that they would be protected. And it was the first time I realized that that's not the case. Was my daughter forgot her money for a field trip, and she was in preschool. And so my husband at the time went to school, went to go take it to her. The St. Joe's preschool is, if you're familiar with the area, there's like a walkway, green area walkway to, and then you kind of go over to the preschool. So my husband ran the money over to the preschool, but they had already left. He goes down there, knocks on the door, nobody's there. They had already left. So then he goes back up to his car and leaves. They called the police because a Black man was lurking around the campus. That is how it was seen by the people that were there. And when I went to pick up, the principal came out to the car and she goes, by chance, was your husband down at the preschool today? And I was, yeah. And she pulled me out of the car so she wouldn't ask this in front of my kids. But I said, yeah. And she goes, okay, well, that solves that. And I was like, solves what? And she goes, well, we, got word of a suspicious person in the area. And then I sat there and I thought, are you asking all of the preschool moms if their husband was down at the school, or just me? And it's like, and the look on her face, and I was like, okay, then that answers the question of, like, you guys, this is where I'm sending my kids to school. And it kind of continued for there. And my kids soon went to public school because I kind of realized that the whole time they were there, all of the books in the library that were on Black history were purchased by our family and donated to the library. It was just kind of, my daughter at one point asked if they were going to do anything for Black History Month. And the teacher said, well, we just celebrated Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. And she's like, that was January. And, so it was realizing that my kids were not going to have needs met in that environment, because race is not something that can just be told that we don't see. And so, and anytime I've had friends tell me that, I don't see race, and I get very inflamed at that, because my children's race is who they are. I mean, my race is who I am, but it's not about taking away their race and not seeing it. It's about identifying that and celebrating who you are because of your race and your experiences that you've received because of it. And so that can, unfortunately, in other instances, telling your kids that they are going to have to be better than white kids at doing things. And that's a hard topic to bring up. Like, we were in the grocery store and my kids were reprimanded by a store manager because another set of kids were running wild through Hy-Vee, and somebody complained, and the manager came to me about my kids. When we could actually, as he's talking to me, you could see these two little buttheads just screaming through the store and knocking stuff off the shelf. And I'm looking at him like, are you serious? And that was the moment that I gave my kids the speech that no matter what, you're always going to have to do better. And that sucks. that shouldn't be the way. But you're going to be looked at first. You know, it's like with my boys, and the topic of consent happened. And it was very important for me to drill that into them at a very young age, what consent means, because I said, I don't want anything to happen where it's misconstrued. You know, my son, my 16-year-old's girlfriend right now, her dad is a police officer and her parents vote for Trump, which is fine, you're political, but I've told him that is very dangerous and it really bothers me, and I don't totally feel safe with you being over there. Because if her family got mad about something, I mean, the credibility goes to the dad because he's a police officer. We've seen how officers are given credibility in situations. And if they find out that, you know, like if you've had sex with their daughter, it's over, you know, like there has to be, you know, a talk with your kids about things like that, because it sucks again that it's this way. But it's just, credibility becomes harder when race is involved, and unfortunately race seems to always be involved, and there's nothing we can do. The only time that I've ever used my privilege for my kids is when I've been able to show up and be loud and obnoxious to somebody who's in an authoritative position that they couldn't do that for, you know, because I can use my white privilege to go and yell at somebody and know that I'm not going to get slapped with cuffs. Mm-hmm. And that's what I can do for my kids. And I've shown them that, but they also understand the limitations. And so they know when it's time to call mom and get loud. But it's the other real quick that I'll go with is the healthcare system. And it's a terrible thing, because healthcare systems, when they see a mixed race family or mixed race children, there are assumptions that will be made. I've had people ask me automatically if we're on, you know, state aid, assume that we're getting WIC, you know, like, well, maybe, you know, do we need to look at your WIC vouchers? And I'm like, what are you talking about? We have private insurance. Like, and there's some stuff that I didn't even know what they were talking about. I didn't know, I think it was like EBT. Again, very privileged. I had no idea what that meant for the longest time. And so, but it's those things where my kids, when they were about 2 and 3, I went to take the garbage out. I had friends over for dinner, and walking them outside, my kids were inside watching a video. I walk them out and also take the trash out at the same time. And I come back in, and the little suckers had gotten into I had some diet pill of something on the counter, and my oldest had opened it, and there were little capsules, and the powder was all over my daughter and on her, and I was like, oh gosh. And so emergency room, instantly rushed them there, because I had no clue what they ingested, but it was one of those instances where it's like stuff can happen in the blink of an eye. Mm-hmm. And I got there, and they were so rude at first, you know, so accusatory. How long were they alone? And, you know, it was, and one of them said like that my daughter looked underweight. My daughter was like 90th percentile for weight all the way up and through 2 years ago when she had a growth spurt. But it was insulting. And I'm sitting there just kind of, and they had said that they needed to call in the Department of Health and Human Services. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there just like at a loss of everything that's happening. My mom is a burn nurse, and she worked at the hospital for about 30 years. And another nurse had walked by and saw me, and she came in, she goes, what happened? And I told her, and she goes out there and she looks at the doctor, she goes, that's LT's daughter. And he goes, oh, because everybody knew my mom. And so all of a sudden he comes in, puts his arm around me, and he goes, you know, this shit really just happens to people. And I was like, wait a second. 2 minutes ago as a child abuser, child neglector, you know, like now all of a sudden because you know my mom, like, oh, they're okay. And it's like, people aren't always, and I can't imagine how it was going to go if that wouldn't have happened. and people are going to make assumptions about your child's predicament and what they're doing and how they're doing. When it came another time of privilege, and this also goes to my ex-husband because he grew up over South Side in Lincoln and Knowles. He, you know, he lived a different type of life than a lot of his cousins did. And so his interaction with like the police and everything growing up was quite different as from what his cousins experienced. And when our 15-year-old started getting out there and doing things, or he was 16 at the time, but he took my husband's truck one day without asking. And so my husband and I had talked about it, and he had said, you know, like, well, we need to teach him a lesson, like this can't happen. And so police were called just to an attempt to scare him. And that was both of our decision. And it was, police came and got involved, and then all of a sudden our kid was cited with, I can't remember what, it wasn't like grand theft, but it wasn't joyriding, it was in between the two. And so then we had to go to court for it. So then we go to court, and they talk to us there and tell us, well, you know, if you're having problems, there's this really good program that we do here that he can take a part of, you know, like once a month. And I'm like, and as a mom who has a teenager and doesn't know what's up from down, I'm like, yeah, support, awesome, that'd be great. Come to find out later that it was called drug court. They enrolled my child in drug court, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with drug court or not, but it is a vortex of hell. And it's good for those who perhaps really need it. But it also is probably one of the most rampant examples in this city of how they are taking children of color and criminalizing them with no real authority to do so and no proof. And so we had to start going to court every week. And my son was a normal teenager. He smoked weed every now and again. We tried to address it, but then they started requiring him to do drug tests. So pretty soon they said that my son was an addict and had to go to rehab, and ordered him to rehab because he smoked weed. Something that's legal the next state over, my child was being told to go to rehab for, which was beyond me. And we had to keep going through all of these motions. He actually even got locked up in juvenile hall, or in the detention center, which is jail, because of truancies. And it was one of those things that's like, wait, what's happening? All of a sudden, we had kids, we'd go into the drug court, and you'd get in front of the judge, and you'd do it with all of the other families around. And the judge in there, you know, you'd listen to it. There's kids that came in, there were white kids that came in with cocaine on them, and they did not go to the detention center. And there were kids that then were tardy to school that got locked up, and only the children of color did. And so it's a nasty system that they worked really hard to try and keep them a part of. You're supposed to be able to technically graduate from the drug program, drug court. But if you don't graduate, they can keep your juvenile record open. And when you're in drug court, every small infraction they will charge you with, as, you know, and then they'll say, we'll handle it through drug court. So even though your kid's not technically doing anything wrong, all of a sudden things start getting thrown at your child that you had no idea about. Like they missed the phone call from a probation officer, all these things. And so then my son kept going and kept going because he was ordered so. And then once it came time for him to age out, they said, well, he didn't technically complete the program, so now his juvenile record is not going to be sealed, which there's nothing really of consequence on it. But it's still one of those things where now if he gets pulled over, the police are going to see this long list of interactions between my son and law enforcement that in no way depicts who my son is now. My son has recently made me a grandma, which I'm not liking being a grandma at 41, but my grandson's pretty cute. But he's, stable. He's a plumber. And on the weekends, he records in his studio because he has been a rapper since he was, as far as I can remember. And that's another stigma problem that we have, where I have a friend whose kid likes to sing country western, and when she posts about it, people are like, oh, that's great, they're going to be the next so and so. And then people talk about young guys that want to rap, and all of a sudden they're wannabe thugs, so it's that type of thing that we put out to kids, the wording that we say to people. And so I've always tried to catch people on that too. It's like, my kid's not a wannabe thug, he's just expressing himself. I mean, I don't listen to a lot of rap, but I listen to his, and I think that he's probably like one of the more brilliant lyricists there is, but I could be biased. I don't know.
Hey, Sarah, I gotta say something really quick. This might cut us off at 8:10 because we have it only allows us to have 40 minutes for the free one.
Okay.
So I just sent everybody a link because I set up a second one. So you might want to copy that link. Do you guys all see it?
Yep.
The chat.
Yeah, it might stop at 8:10. But last time it just let us keep going, so I don't know what's gonna happen.
I saw a message that our Zoom session was upgraded.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
extended.
you saw that? I didn't see
Yeah.
that. Cool.
We saw
Okay,
that.
that's good. Okay, so maybe we won't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
That's good.
but I did copy it just in case.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so sorry to interrupt. That was
That's
probably
okay. There's one other thing I was going to touch on, and that is receiving white guilt from other people about how you raise your children, because and this came from quite a few people that my kids wouldn't know that their race was an issue if I wasn't telling them that it was. Meaning, because I bought my daughter black dolls to play with, then that, because I had people, well, she's white too. And it's like, yeah, but she's black. I've never tried to kid myself in any manner to try and say, no, you guys, you're white. Let's celebrate that, because no matter what, my kids are black. And there will be people that come to you that don't understand, that will try to actually make race an issue, telling you that it's your own fault. And that's not true, because you need to raise your kids as how they feel they are being seen. And unless they're white, they're going to be seen as a person of color. Then that's just the way, how they're going to identify on their driver's license, and how somebody would describe them if they came, walking into a restaurant. It's just the way it is. So don't ever let somebody try to tell you that what you're doing isn't right for your kids, especially when you're trying to raise them to be confident within themselves, which is already a hard enough job to do as a parent when you don't have race involved. I mean, you can remember back to when you were coming up, how self-confidence played a role in everything. And right now, race is everywhere. I mean, it's all over everybody's social media. It's all over the news. It's all over everything. And so it is something that anybody who isn't white is thinking about right now, is thinking about how to act. Like my kids say that they say they love being biracial because he's like, we can adapt to any situation. My son Caleb, he's like, I can go up to North Omaha and fit in just fine, and I can come sit down with your family over at Hillcrest and fit in just fine. So it's a matter of teaching our kids to have that confidence, but also letting them know that however they want to be is how they should be, and however they're comfortable being. Having issues with my tripod. And teaching them young, to see themselves and other things that they play with is not a problem. Teaching them young that, you know, like I know, like I bought my daughter different dolls, and I tried to, and my mom did a great job on this as well, but we tried to stay away from white dolls because I didn't want her feeling a certain way, to which she did when she got to when she got into school. You know, she didn't like her hair at all. She really struggled with that. And at the time, I thought the best thing to do was, when your kid is hurting, you want to fix it. So I thought, I'm going to fix it. And we went to one of the wig shops, and I got one of the little ponytail attachments, and I would straighten the front of her hair, put it up, and then wrap the little ponytail, and she'd have this nice little slick ponytail that she loved so much. And I did her a disservice by doing that, because I later, not long after that, I wrote a story based on that, where it was this little girl who went to school and felt uncomfortable with her hair. Same thing. But then people started tapping her on the back, and they'd say, "Hi, Rachel." And she's like, "I'm not Rachel." And she'd turn around, and then somebody else would come up and they'd tap her on the back, and they'd say, "Hi, Jennifer." And she'd turn around. She's like, "I'm not Jennifer." And then she started to realize that her hair is what made her uniquely identifiable, that it was something that she should actually feel good about. And so, which I used to read that story to her often. The other one was, I wrote a book called Yes, Daddy, I Remember. But it's about, and this can go for adopted kids too, because it's really about, what type of behaviors do you pick up from somebody that's not just part of their genetic makeup? Because, you know, my kids got accused of being adopted themselves, that I'm not their real mom, or that I'm a nanny, or, you know, things like that. And so I wrote a story for my kids that was, you know, the child came home from school and that things were being said. And so the dad walks her through, you know, like, you know how you and mom only like to eat, you know, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches? And just, you know, just, yes, I can remember that. You know how you and mom are the only ones that like to put puzzles together. And it's fight with your kids, is trying to connect with them with those common things that you have that are not physical. For my kids, it was reminding them that, you know, like my daughter thinks that, I mean, she is, as far as personality goes, she is a carbon copy of me. So, but it doesn't matter that my kids don't have my hair. They don't need that to feel a connection. And the same goes with like adopted kids as well, because so much stuff that we get from our parents is because of environment. It's not necessarily genetic things that we're passing on, because two people like puzzles doesn't make them related. It just makes them like-minded. And so reminding our kids.
Could I jump in for a second? Because we have another person we want to present here as well. And you have done an excellent job. Your story is very, very powerful. And I could listen to it for a long period of time, but out of fairness, I want to give, I think,
go for it.
A chance to go ahead and talk some too as well here. So Jessica, let's turn it over to Pete.
Yes, Pete.
Well, and I agree with John. Like I said, so many of the things you said are going to be duplicates of what I would say. So I'm not going to, you know, I'll kind of say on a number of points, I'll kind of say echo, because she articulately said a number of the things that I was gonna hit on. Again, first off, I appreciate Sarah, you being willing to share. I think that's, a lot of people have asked, like, what can you do? And right now, and I don't even think just in these times, but just in general, is to have individuals that are willing to share is probably one of the biggest blessings right now that people can take away, because there's a lot of individuals, and I've been kind of selfish in some ways, because there's, I don't want to say trauma, so to speak, but it's been difficult in probably the last month to oftentimes be open and be willing to share. And I'm the type of person that I've always told young people. I'm the youth development coordinator in Lincoln Public Schools, and I've worked with young people in youth development for nearly 30 years. And I've always told them the worst somebody could tell you is no. And they might put an F word in front of it, and it's still really not that bad, but they'll tell you no. So thank you on that. I'll give you a little bit of quick background, and then I also want to leave you guys time for questions. And if you have questions, I'm the type of person, please put them in the chat. If you want to send it to me privately, I'll be more than willing to address it. I do try to be fairly open. Like I said, my name's Peter Ferguson. You know, I'm the son of a mother who was born in Compton, California, Alita M. Ferguson. And she was called Mrs. Ferguson or ma'am. There was no, what I see a lot today by young people calling their parents by their first name. I never got to do that. I think even at her funeral, I called her ma'am and Mrs. Ferguson. And my dad was born in Nacogdoches, Texas. It's in the south of Texas, poor Tyler, Texas, if any of you are football fans, Earl Campbell. And again, he was 25 years military, and my mom was 40 years as an educator. And I had a sister, as I mentioned before, I was adopted. And so with that being said, my mom went to USC. Again, she was born, like I said, in Compton, California, the real Compton, California. So when, you know, kids say NWA, this, that, and the other, she passed away a couple of years ago from Alzheimer's, and went back. It's not Disneyland for many, but they adopted me from Pittsburgh. They, again, were in the service, so I am a self-proclaimed military brat. We lived in 6 to 7 different states. I say I was from Arizona because that's where they brought me kicking and screaming from. And I like to say I was the Black Griswolds, where they strapped me on the top of the car and brought me here to Lincoln, Nebraska, because I did not want to come. They said, we're moving here. And I was like, this is not happening. I'm 14. I'm a grown man. And my dad put me in some sort of hold that I don't remember. And I was in the car and I was here less than 24 hours later. My personal experience, and again, I'm not, you know, I'll skim through it because, again, I do want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. But Sarah's talked about it a little bit, was, you know, I grew up middle class. Okay. We weren't rich. My parents would always say, you know, I would say, oh man, my friends are making fun of me because they say we're rich and we have money. And they'd be like, you don't have a dime. We have money, but you don't have a damn thing. You know? And I was like, oh, okay, well, reality set in. But we know, you know, I didn't worry about where my next meal was coming from. I had what I needed. I had more than I think, what does the one guy say? I had more than I deserved. I really did. I had more than I deserved, but I was not, you know, I never wanted. And he was unemployed for a while because he had a job where he worked in corrections. He was not incarcerated. So from his day, he would work in corrections. He was associate warden at the state pen. He was commissioner of law enforcement in St. Louis, Plantation, Florida. So he was oftentimes hired by the mayor, and he was a strict disciplinarian. So if the mayor got ousted, his job would leave. And so once I went into high school, my mom and my parents made a decision that I would finish high school wherever I was. And so for a year and a half of my high school, he was in Washington State or in St. Louis, and then he would come back. And so that was kind of, but so, you know, Gabrielle Union oftentimes talks about scholars in that transition. I'll get to that in a little bit, but she talks about, you know, raising kids of color with privilege. And Sarah spoke a little bit about that. And I don't, I can't tell you what it's like to be in a gang or ever be hungry, or, you know, people say, you know, did you live here and live here? You know, I was always comfortable, but I did still face the same challenge. And my parents always made sure that said, I don't care if you have money or don't have money, you're still Black. And many of the situations and many of my experiences that happened, whether it was growing up, going through high school, going through college, and then having a daughter who's now 19, reminded me of that. But it has been a constant code switching, so to speak, journey through my life, which many of your children will do. And honestly, as parents, you're doing as well with the environments that you go in, whether it be with relatives, whether it be with friends, whether it be, with your children. And if you don't know that term, code switching, so to speak, you take on mannerisms of the environment that you may be in. And I oftentimes say you take that on for the betterment and the success of your well-being. Some people say you're faking it, you're faking the funk or whatever else, but I take on some roles or some codes or switch in certain ways for my betterment to succeed, in various ways. And people, it's tough sometimes because it's that balance of, is that your identity? Or are you giving up pieces, or are you gaining things? And for many of our scholars of color, and each of you have spoken, and why you're here, is that something that your scholars are going, and I say scholars, I don't use the word kiddos or kids or students, but they, so scholars is the same thing, umbrella. But that is something that is going to be, it's not an intangible, it is a life skill. It is a life skill that they're going to have. And I would just implore you, if there's one thing that you take from this, is that they gain that ability to code switch for their success and for their survival, more than anything else. The talk, Sarah's talked about that. I recall the talk that I had with my father. And if you're not familiar with the talk, for many white families, I kind of tongue-in-cheek say it's the most uncomfortable conversation that you have. It's like, who's going to have the conversation about the birds and the bees with my kid, with Jane or Sally or whatever. The talk for many families of color, African-American families, is, what you do when you're pulled over by the police. How do you handle yourself in the mall or in an environment, that's uncomfortable, in certain neighborhoods, certain situations. And so that's the talk that my parents had with me. There's a long, short story of it. I remember my dad bought my mom a new car on my birthday, 16th birthday. Now, okay, that was me. I'm not, no, it was, but I remember going out and I'm like, man, the car's out here. It's Pathfinder, put my hands on it. He goes, get in here. And I remember, and he said, put both hands on the wheel. And I'm like, I want to play the radio. I want to pop my key sweat tape in. I'm ready to go, this, that, and the other, get everything lined up. And he's saying, you're a hothead. And I had a temper in high school. And he said, you are going to be pulled over by the police. He goes, you may have been doing something. You may be speeding, you may not. And I do. I have a lead foot, okay? Admittedly, I do. But he said, this is what you need to do. And what I will tell you, to this day, I follow that protocol no matter what. I have been stopped, and my sister's in Oklahoma. It's a story about 2 or 3 years ago over the 4th of July. She came up from Oklahoma. She's married to a white individual, but they carry a loaded weapon. They can keep a chamber in the chamber ready to go. And so they took my car and they had it in my glove box, and I didn't know it. We went to go get fireworks. I can't remember, Hickman or whatever. We live on West A. So we went out, and I was driving back, and I was speeding and pulled over. And the talk for me was, get everything out before you can, have the windows down, have your hands on when they come up. And I opened the glove box, and this Glock was sitting in the glove box. And I will tell you, to this day, that was the scariest. I had not been that scared in my life. And I remember my daughter and the cousins, there were 3 girls, were sitting in the back, and I was basically yelling, you need to call mom now. Call mom. And the girls were like, what's wrong? What's daddy yelling? And I said, there's a gun here. And I said, call her now. And I really told, but I did not want to end up being like, I care what happens to me. Don't get me wrong. Okay. But I didn't want them to see me humiliated in front of them. And it had in the chamber, because they can keep it loaded. They can keep one load. And I remember the sheriff came up and he went like this, and the bullet came out, and da-da-da. And technically he should have taken me to jail. And I drove up. And so I just say those things because I think it was because of my ability to code switch, my ability in that manner, that he said, I'm going to let you put this under, and you see where you live. I go, you can follow me home. You can take it. You can throw it away for all I care. Okay. And to this day, me and my sister, we don't converse a lot, because I could, to be honest, and this is going to sound really, really bad, but if I would have died, you know, or something would have happened, I'd have gone to jail. But I did not want to be humiliated in front of my daughter and other individuals. That is my biggest fear. That is my biggest fear. Okay, and it's not because of ego or anything else. It's because that is my biggest fear. And so I did go to Hastings College out in Western Nebraska. How did I end up at Hastings College? My mom, we went out on a tour. My mom walked on campus and she's like, "This is a beautiful place. I wish I could have gone here as a young person." And I was like, "Hell, I'm coming here for free, coach." And so hence I was out at Hastings College, academic, athletic, scholarship. If you talk about personal experiences, I've had many of the, some of the things that, and I'm going to get into my daughter here in a quick minute, but, I've had situations where, in high school, and this, I graduated high school in 91. It's really not that long ago. Individuals couldn't go to prom with me because I was Black. And I remember joking, asking, "Oh, why you chicks, dragging me along, da-da-da, you can't." And she's like, I go, "You can't go because I'm Black," and got real silent. And I'm like, oh, snap. That's the truth. Had somebody, I think it was my senior or junior year, that wanted to go to prom with me from another school, but needed to have a friend come pick me up because her dad was racist. They were going to take pictures together, and then I was going to go to prom with them. I didn't do it. Her dad is somebody pretty prominent here in town to this day. Okay. So those are some of my experiences that have shaped me. Microaggressions, if you're not familiar with those, I think, so you made light of those. And microaggressions are those things, I tell people, like, "Oh, are you going to unfriend them off, social media and this, that, and the other?" This is the deal. People who are blatantly racist or bigots don't scare me. They really don't, because I know where they stand. I know who they are. It's the individuals that will sit at your dinner table, or they will befriend you, or you're the greatest thing going, and then go off. Those are the individuals that I worry about. And those people that pick and do little things and say different things. I work for a school district, okay? I'm not gonna, and I'm very proud of it. I think we do some phenomenal things. We have some very big challenges as well, okay? I'm just gonna be very blunt. But one of the aggressions is there's not very many people of color that work at our school district. Okay, so when I'm in the hall with maybe another person of color, or I'm up on on the executive floor, third floor, people will come by and say, "What are you doing up here?" Looks like trouble. Looks like trouble. I would tell you, 90% of the time, that's an occurrence. That's a microaggression. People think it's cute, and I'll code switch and smile. Yeah, looks like you're without your, but that's a microaggression. And your scholars and your kids are getting those on a regular basis. And I don't want to say this is a mean world. Like, Maya Angelou always talks, "Astonish a mean world with acts of kindness." In her poem Continue. Okay. And that's the way I look at it. I'm not saying this for things that you don't know, but what I also will tell you is from a tool set, that code switching, for them to continue to astonish a world and act, with continue to astonish a mean world with acts of kindness. You have to do that. You have to continue to do that. Okay. With that kind of, and it's hard to turn the other cheek. It is hard. It is very, very hard. I've struggled with it. Weddings, I've been that, I'm the one in the photo of a lot of weddings. Black friend. There's an article out, I think it's called Black Friend Roy, if you haven't seen it. Okay. And I've been that individual because of how I was raised, where I went to school, I was everybody's best friend. I mean, there was a span. Honestly, I tell people I hate 24 to about 30. Like, defriend, if there's another piece of advice you want to tell your kids, defriend everybody from that. Just be a great acquaintance, but don't be their best friend, because they will show up in a bunch of weddings. Because I don't know if it was just my year or whatever else, but they felt like everybody had to have a Black friend in the wedding, and that stuff's expensive. Okay, it is downright expensive, and they weren't good all the time. The food sucked because it wasn't what I wanted to eat. I ended up at the Siostas Temple or whatever else in racist venues, listening to racist grandmas and grandpas. Like, who's your Black friend? Who's this? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm the one who set you and your girlfriend, don't let me get up there and have open mic night and go ahead and start talking about yourself, okay? So you end up in a bunch of pictures, but the nice part is I'm the only one they remember who it is because everybody else blends together, okay? But I will tell you, like, I have been in that situation, and it sucks. I mean, it, you know, where I'm sorry about my grandma, you know, I'm sorry about my grandpa. They're just like that. Yeah, this is Thursday, dude. Like, this isn't even the rehearsal dinner, and I got to last till Sunday to do this. I will not be at breakfast on Sunday morning. I'm just telling you, okay? Because the Lord can only work 2 out of these 3 days for you. All right, but that's the truth. That becomes part of it. You know, I think the other thing is for your children, but for yourself, I think, and Sarah's kind of talked about it a little bit, but jobs, but we all try to establish safe spaces for our kids and our scholars, okay, and people. What I would encourage you to do is your kids know that you're probably a safe space for them, but they need a brave space. They need a brave space, and there's a difference between the two. And it's not a phrase that it's not a phrase that I created. Juwan Baker gave it to me, and something that we did. And safe spaces are great. Schools are safe spaces, okay? But we need to have brave spaces. And in schools and in your home, you need to have a space where your son or your daughter or foster kid or even me can come in and just say, this sucks, or this isn't working, or I just feel a certain way. And honestly, I struggle with that sometimes because I've struggled with that with my own daughter. I'm not going to say that I've been perfect by any means of creating that. And in the last, you know, maybe year, you know, even saying, you know what, if something happens to the car, it happens to the car. Okay. If you need to leave that environment, you need to leave that environment, but establishing that brave space. And then, you know, I've been called, to be honest, I've been called white. I've been called an Uncle Tom. You know, I've been called probably every name on the book on social media, not on social media. And those things, they impact you and they eat at you. I'll end with this. And again, I know what you talked, my daughter's 19. She's biracial, mixed. My wife's white. She has, again, we've tried to, just like what you try to do, give her more than we had. Okay, she's been raised as a individual of color with privilege. She's had more than she needs. I like to say, but not more than she deserves. And there's two different things. She deserves the best. She deserves to have as much as anybody else, if not more than anybody else. So I will never say that she doesn't deserve what she's gotten, but she has her needs met. You know, my first experience, my wife and I were not married when we had my daughter. Okay. That, you know, it is what it is, but we are now. But my first experience when she was, well, two experiences. One, I remember I was working at a youth serving agency and I did not tell my boss that my wife was pregnant for various reasons, but a lot of because of the reaction. And when I did tell her, she immediately was like, I can't believe you didn't tell me. One, we don't have that kind of relationship. Two, they immediately went to the board of directors and they asked the board, she polled basically the board, and the board had a poll on whether I could be effective in my job or not because I had, my girlfriend was pregnant. When we went to the hospital, we couldn't go to the original hospital we had. We went to St. E's, and I shouldn't have said, but we went to St. E's. She was born, and when she was born, the nurse came over to me and said, I'm not, you know, when you sign this, you're responsible for life. That's my experience. My dad had to be taken care of, saying, I don't care for the hospital. Okay. There were other subtle comments. Not as dark as I thought she'd be. But my first initial feeling when my daughter was born was not what many of you had, you know, if you had children or what your parents felt. It was, is she going to be pretty enough to have a date to homecoming? Is she going to be, when's the first time she's going to be called the N-word? When am I going to have a conversation about her, you know, her hair? My mom, I remember telling my wife, she's like, don't let her straighten her hair. Don't let her do that to her hair. Her hair is beautiful. And my daughter likes to, at times for her pictures, has her hair straight. And my mom had Alzheimer's for about 15 or so years. And so there were a lot of things I know my mom was rooted in and loved my wife, loved my daughter. But those are things that she felt like that gave up elements of her. I remember being in small towns. I played basketball a lot in those town team tournaments, and people would come up, "Oh, that's such a pretty colored baby." And I'm like, what? The Civil War's been over for a while, man. I don't like, you know, I just, finding the struggle of allowing her to find her voice and whatever that voice may be, and within her identity. She had a number of white friends. She was also very involved and knew her history and knew right from wrong and knew when she was being treated fairly or being treated unfairly. And one of the things is I wish she was a little bit more naive, because she's almost too smart for her own good, but she knows the difference from right from wrong. She would say, like, I said, "Oh, we're doing this cultural thing with so-and-so." And she's like, "Yeah, our coach thinks he is, but he could really use, they would say certain things or whatever." And she's like, "If I wasn't here, they'd say that about me." And so her journey, and I'll just kind of say at the end, I mean, even from in high school, I think she went to Southwest High School, and I remember they had a thing, and I'm pretty actively involved, but I remember she shot a text and she's like, "This isn't right." And it was going to be, they were naming the football game the Battle of the South, Reclaim the South. And she's like, I don't feel comfortable, like, this isn't right. And I think because of the nature of who you are, you're like, you could get that, you understood, but she's like, and I said, "Well, I'm not happy with this, I'm calling." And she's like, and I remember my wife said, "Your dad's gonna call." So she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "They had to take it down. I think they know who called." But at the end of the day, like, it hurts me that comes back on her. But at the other end, like, I can't perpetuate and let that go on. But there are so many other things that I almost, in some ways, in some form or fashion, I did let go on, because I wanted her to navigate and have that journey. And I don't want to say be like it, but just be able to be a part of what she does. So, I'll leave you with these two things. I think it's, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. I know in your role as parent, like, it's never going to be completely comfortable. She's 19 years old and I'm not completely comfortable. She's a freshman in college, and I'll be honest, I'm not completely comfortable. There are things that I wish, or I would want her college coaches to do and reach out in regards to this time and check in on her. And I'm not completely comfortable with all of it, what they have done and what they haven't. And then, I say the 3 A's. We all want our kids to have A's. And I would say, you want to be aware. You want them to be aware. Make sure that they're aware. And I think Sarah touched on that. Instill in them that they have the right to be assertive. Instill that they have the right, and you do as parents have the right to be assertive. There have been times, and I think I don't speak for anybody else, but I have been passive. Okay. I have not said anything. And if there's anything that you're seeing now with young people and that they can take away and that they can watch, like, tell them you have the right to be assertive. You have the right to be an A. You have a right to be a champion. And normally we get to only see that during certain months or in a clip, and they're seeing it firsthand, and you're seeing it firsthand. And that is absolutely awesome. And the last thing, sorry, I'm just going to show you a book. The last thing is acknowledge that there's systematic, racism and challenges and things. Acknowledge it, because you're going to have to sometimes with other individuals make them aware, and then once you make them aware, they can go on the road to acknowledge. But you're going to have to acknowledge it. I tell people this, and I cannot. People are like, "Are you surprised about what's going on? Are you surprised about this? Are you surprised about who gets elected?" I don't have the luxury to be surprised. I don't, because if I'm surprised, I'm gonna be like the Joker, and my face is gonna be like this the entire time, grinning or whatever. I don't, because if I'm surprised, I cannot be prepared to take the action that I need to take. And so that's what I would leave you with. Again, I want to definitely leave you time for questions. I know oftentimes many of you said you had young children, and I can send different books to you. I know Sarah said she provides them in the library, but for your young children, there's one. It's called Let the Children March. It's about the Birmingham Children's March, and it's a picture. I do a lot. That's not my reading level, but I show it to you anyways. It is a fantastic kind of parallel that you can read or have the kids read and say, you know, how does that align with things that are going on today? So that's a little bit about my story, and I don't know questions or however you want to move forward, but I appreciate your time.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys to both of you. You guys touched on some really awesome topics that I think is going to help a lot of us. Does anybody have any questions?
And I'll real quickly, I will echo what Jessica said. I've got to be a dutiful husband and get off. I'm cooking a meal, and so I got to take care of some things for my wife. And so you all enjoy your discussion. Jessica, get back to me as to what we're doing to move forward, and we will move forward. Again, thank you, our two presenters. You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, sir.
To hear your story. All righty. See you tomorrow, sir. All righty.
Have a good night. Thank you.
All righty.
I think Sarah had a question. Was she typing it or?
Yeah, I thought I saw. Okay. Let me look.
Yeah.
Girl's son dating someone. I have not had conversations with her. It doesn't, you know, people pretty much assume that I am pretty left when they look at me. I don't know why, but you know, it's one of those things. Maybe it's the blue hair. But and so I've always been, as far as politically going, I've always been very outspoken about how I feel, and sometimes that's not always a good thing because I'll say things in company that I probably shouldn't, and I've even done it at the workplace. And but my son shares the same traits as me, where he'll speak up pretty quickly on certain things, and so and plus those two FaceTime all the time, and so he'll come into my room and ask me something, and I have no idea that his girlfriend is sitting there on FaceTime listening to my answer, which completely, I mean, she'll say something and then he'll come and ask me ask me my opinion, and I'll have no idea that I just obliterated this poor child through my answer, which it's not what I intended to do. But it's, you know, dating with your kids in any regard, it's kind of, you know, like I said, with my kids growing up, you know, we're Southsiders, and so for the most part, they're friends up until a certain age when they started, you know, socializing outside of their geographical circle changes. And so you kind of know who is what, and them growing up, they had to deal with quite a few conservative parents, and they were like, you know, Peter talked, my kids were the token Black person for their groups of friends. My son is right now, and he kind of is very well aware of it. I joked with him one night when he asked to go somewhere, and I said, well, what are the kids' names? And he listed off a bunch of names. I was like, those are all white kids. It's like, where are you going? I want to make sure that what you're doing is okay. And the reason I say that is because these kids can go out and do things and not achieve the same consequences that my kid would if something were to happen. There's, you know, so it's knowing who your kids' friends are, because you need your kids as friends. And I've had the talk with my children's friends. I've had the talk that I do not want them to get my child killed because they think they're invincible. And, you know, having to tell somebody else's kid that is difficult, but also they need to be aware that they can't just act however they want to act.
And can I, to reinforce something Sarah said real quick, is I've always, and as parents, as white parents or whatever, this is the deal. I'm your parent, I'm not your friend. And so I was always a default. And so most of the time she goes, so-and-so won't date me because they're afraid of you. you know, or they know that they can't, like, you know, I'm not like I told her, she goes to college and she comes back with a drink of choice. I consider that a win. Okay. I'm not gonna, you know, be up and on. But if I'm the default and I'm the reason she doesn't go somewhere or they think twice, I don't care. I don't care. And I think too many times we worry about that because we want our son or our daughter to navigate and this, that, and the other, and to have friends. This is the deal. Like those people in the weddings I'm in, I've only started hearing from them in the last 2.5, 3 weeks because they want to apologize, or they're like, I've been thinking about you. And I'm like, I haven't thought about you, you know? So I think, you know, I think that's something that as parents and white parents in general, be your kid's default, that they're like, my mom or dad's gonna whoop my rear end, and the punishment that I'm gonna receive from them is far worse than the enjoyment that I'm gonna receive from you for a quick hot minute. Because Sarah's right. Like my daughter's one of 2 kids of color on the volleyball team in Northwest Missouri State. If you don't know where that is, it's in Maryville, Missouri. One of 2. When somebody rooted there. There you go. For some reason, you Bearcats are all over the place. I didn't know that before, but I remember when they got there, like summer last year for workouts. Like, we got to go get fake IDs right away. And she's like, I'm not going to get a fake ID. Well, why not? You're a party pooper. What is the deal? I'm one of 2 black kids. They're gonna know who I am. It's not that hard to figure out. And I'm not gonna lie to you. It probably sucks. It sucks. She's a DD. It sucks. But that's the fact, that's the reality for black and brown kids. Like there's great things you can get from standing out, but you stand out all the time. In Hastings College, I stood out all the time. You're going to be the first one. Hey, we got kids who go to parties and run in LPS looking at green. And I tell people, I said, police cameras, when you go to a party or you do something and HD shows up a lot better than a huddle video. And that's if your kids play sports, huddle's the thing that does sport. An HD camera on a policeman's vest shows up. And if you happen to have some hue to your skin, it shows up differently than a white kid does. So it isn't that hard to pick you out. It really isn't. And I don't know how many times, and I'll turn it back to you, but I don't know how many times that people, well, I don't know how I got caught. They didn't get caught. You're slow. You're black. You're slow. You're black. You're slow. You got different hair than everybody else. It wasn't that hard to pull you out. It really wasn't. And we got to be honest. We have to be honest, and you have to instill that. And yes, you have to be 110% better. And the deal is, your highlight isn't going to be through high school or college. It's going to be when you're 35 and 40. And that sucks, having to tell your kids that. It really does, that you got to wait to enjoy everything else. Like my wife, she'll talk about drinking things and things she did. This is the deal. I was scared to death of my dad. I didn't do that at 15, 16, 17, 18. I didn't drink till I was 21 in college. Okay. But the fact of the matter is, he instilled that in me in such a way that I could have highlights at being 47 years old, when I could handle it and make those decisions. And it sucks. I will tell you, it will suck for a 14 or a 15-year-old or a 9-year-old. Why can't I do things that other people do? And it'll break your heart to have to tell them that, or them to say, well, my mom won't let me do that. Well, your mom and dad look like me, but I don't.
Right. And it's not about, you can't actually be the cool parent. It just doesn't exist. When you have a child of color, you can't afford to be the cool parent. And my oldest, I mean, they just told me the other day in a group chat that, and I joked with them like, no, I was the cool mom. And they were like, no, none of our friends wanted to come over because we couldn't get away with anything. Like, they knew that you would be inside everybody's business. I mean, I came home one time and just thought that I smelled weed, and I took all the kids' phones and called everybody's parents. And, it's like, because I'm sitting here like, consequences don't even go the same for me having the mixed race kid. Like, it's different. I don't have, you're not extended privilege in that situation, because then all of a sudden people assume the worst in you. We're just, it's completely different system. You know, it's last year, my son went riding around with his cousin and another girl, and he was in the back seat. They got pulled over. Wasn't his car, but he was in the car with two white girls, one of them his cousin. And in the console, the other girl had marijuana, and my son got cited for possession. Tell me how that makes sense. He was in the back seat, not his car. And so it's, and things like that, where it's like, I've told, you know, I use that as an example to my 16-year-old. I'm like, there is nothing that you are going to try and say or do that will tell me that it's okay for you to be in a car when you have not looked and to see what's in that car. You know, like, even if your friend has an air pellet gun, you will not get in that car. You will not hang out with them. He had a friend growing up that used to have the little airsoft rifles and, or, you know, pistols that they use for fun. And it's like, you can't play with him. Sorry. I mean, it's stupid for him to even have that out anymore, but it's telling your kids that it's just not the same. There's other things that they can do and have fun with, but those are some of the things that are just off limits. And I wanted to talk about, Peter had made a comment earlier about with the education, especially education system here in Nebraska. Just before COVID started, there was a group of parents that I was involved with at East, because there was an occurrence that happened at East High School where some text messaging that a kid had suggested that a Black student be lynched, and some terrible language. And so when that happened, the next day, the administration called all of the Black students out of their classes and took them to the box, which is their media area. And had these kids there for, it was about 1.5 or 2 periods, telling them, you know, like, well, what does that make you feel like? You know, it's like, they didn't take the white kids and say, hey, don't do this. They took the Black kids and asked them, you know, and we had to go to the school and say, this is not how you handle this. You don't pick out the minority and talk to them about how they feel when somebody makes a threat on them. That's not the solution here. The solution is that we need to talk to the white students and say, this is not acceptable. Any form of racism is not acceptable and will be, you know, you will be expelled. And that kid at the time had not been expelled, and we were all appalled at this. And LPS has a long ways to go when it comes to race, when it comes to, you know, I think my kids, even now, I think at East, I think there's only 1 teacher of color at East, if I can recall right, maybe 2. But it was high school before my kids had a teacher of color in anything. And so those microaggressions are going to occur in their classrooms as well. And so you have to check in with your kids on the regular, because it could be coming from their teacher. And not saying that their teacher is a bad person. A good friend of mine is a kindergarten teacher, and she just made a post recently that had talked about how she didn't realize the microaggressions that she may have been doing in her, you know, own classroom, that she just had no idea. And it's not until that people, you know, she started taking the time to educate herself on certain things that she realized that maybe she is more part of the problem than she thought she was. And which is great to hear somebody actually say to and cop to and say, like, and I told her that day, I was like, the day that you realize that, you became part of the solution, just so you know, like, don't feel bad. But it's that thing with people that these kids can be exposed to microaggressions. And because my friend Amy, there's no way that I would have ever told anybody that she is racist, even subtly so. But the fact that she caught that behavior herself and wants to stop it. So we might think our kids are in classroom and they're safe and everything, but we probably need to check in on them a little bit more often than we think they should be or ever would be if they were just white. And check in and see how they're feeling when they're, you know, are they comfortable alone with their teacher? You know, like, or does their teacher make them feel bad in any way? Those types of things you have to check in on, because like I said, it's about teaching people these microaggressions and trying to get rid of those in any way that we can, although it's going to be very hard, but the whole point is trying to educate people.
Pete has to go here in just a minute, but Pete, would you mind saying what you said to me about code switching too? Could you say that?
You know, you had asked the question, people oftentimes, how do you teach code switching? You know, and I think you have to be intentional with your efforts and what you're doing. I'm not going to say it's easy by any means, but I think it's watching. I speak candidly with my daughter about situations in which it occurs. So in the talk, that's one of them. You know, okay, how do you talk to the officer or people in positions of authority by giving them the respect, but also knowing what your rights are. Not. And it sounds bad when I said be assertive, but not. I was loud, like, in some ways, like I would code switch and put myself in, different positions. I'm 6'3", 250. And so, it's different when you're playing football, and it's different when, if I'm interacting with a female, a white female. So I code switch, a different way. I'm not saying I give up my identity. I'm not saying I sell out. I think sometimes people get the wrong impression on that. But it's you have to practice it, and some people like, man, you're better at being white than some white people are, or whatever else. And that's not the fact. Again, to me, code switching is putting yourself in a situation that you can be successful. And when I went to LA with my family, and and my mom's family, I code switched, and there was a very different demeanor and how I acted there than how I would here. The other thing is have your children watch other people and just say, like, okay, did they code switch? Why did they code switch? How did they act? What outcome did they achieve? Was it the outcome that you think they desired, that they wanted? If not, why? And that's no different than what we do in any other, component. But I think you have to start making them aware and visually watching, whether it's on TV, whether it's out. You take notice when you see individuals do it. It can be as simple in a grocery store that you see somebody, when they see their friend, they're giving dabs. Well, I mean, nobody's touching each other now or whatever else. But then all of a sudden they get up and they're like, the cash register, hi, how you doing? You're like, man, I just saw you in aisle 9 jumping all over your boy, and you guys were just loving each other, or whatever else. I think that's important. When I check out at stores, I see individuals and I see young people, like, we haven't done a good job in some ways of doing that. Because I'll go through a line and they'll see me, and I love the connection. I really do, okay? But I always say there's not enough of us in power to be doing. They're like, hey, yo, man, it's really cool. All right, yeah, thanks, dude. And I'm like, no, it's sir, or whatever. Like, I'm a customer. Because then I see the white person in back of me or the white woman in front of me. They don't do the same thing. And people are like, well, they're making a connection with you. No, if I'm not saying something, then I'm not teaching them a skill set so they can be successful in life. Because the fact of the matter is, yeah, I would love to see a lot of CEOs, but Sarah was absolutely right. My daughter had one teacher of color going from K through 12, and that was for a quarter. I'll be generous, in a semester in middle school. Okay, so there's not enough people that we can do dabs and do this, that, and the other if you want to get to the position where you're going to get. It's not saying that that's not a situation you can't, but you've got to be assertive. You've got to be aware. The last thing I just kind of told Jessica that I wanted to say is, again, I'm a big Maya Angelou person. She has a quote. She says, I often forget what people said. I often forget what people have done, but I've always remembered how people have made me feel. And I think everything that, you do will come down to that. You will say things, you will do things, but the feeling that your kids are going to have, if they feel empowered, if they feel like they can take on the world, is going to allow them, when the first time somebody calls them, the N-word, and they've already been called it. So it's going to empower them when you're not there. It's going to empower them. And I looked at it, and I'll leave with this, is that was the thing for me is, I have been fortunate to be there for my daughter for a lot of things. but I always have to look at it as I may not be there. What happened if I passed away when she was 12? What happens if I'm gone when she gets into her first serious relationship, and it's not necessarily she's in a relationship and a family, and she has to go in and she has to make a really tough decision because she really loves the guy, but the family doesn't love her. Okay. And I, many of us, I've been in college where, dated somebody and they're like, they couldn't take me home for Thanksgiving. Everybody on the team went or whatever. And it was great when they came and the parents were all excited, but couldn't, or they were going to lose. Their parents were going to stop paying for college if I continued to date them. And they continued to date me. And so you turn around and this is what I say to them. I'm worth more than $40,000 a year, but I don't see this going where you think it's going to go. So keep the 40,000. You're better off with the 40,000. But it sucks that that your son or may have to say that and experience that. But they have to be empowered. They have to have the feeling that they can do and make those decisions when you're not there. So I thank you guys for who you are, what you're doing. The journey has a lot of highs. I'd like to say it'll have a lot more highs than lows. But there's going to be some challenges, but man, love the highs. Love them when you get it. Like, jump up and down because they're so special. Sarah will say this probably, but I remember elementary school like yesterday, and sometimes you get so consumed about getting them armored up for everything, and you miss some of those moments. And what I would just tell you to do is balance, armor them up, but make sure that there's a spot that you can open it up and get in and give them a hug and enjoy and love what some of those moments are, because they're going to go through a lot. You're going to go through a lot. But so that being said, I thank you guys for your time. Let me know if there's Jessica has my contact information if you ever want to contact me for anything. And Sarah, thank you for sharing. And I don't have any great meal like John. I didn't know he's got the 9 o'clock meal set going on. So date night or something. So I'm just gonna go find me a piece of pie or something and finish some work. So thank you guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think we should go ahead and wrap it up too, because
I wanted to say one last thing, if I could. Just with the talking with being parents and everything, that always ask permission. If your kid comes and tells you that something happened that was race related, ask permission. Don't just get angry and bear parent and go, I'm gonna go and yell at this person or whatever the case is. Ask permission. Ask if they want you to even intercede for them. Maybe they just wanted to vent, and maybe they've already said something or done something. But it's just that we have to prevent ourselves from being white saviors, which can be hard. But because they're our children and we love them, but always just ask them because sometimes they don't need us to do that for them. They just needed us to hear them.
That's perfect. I think we've had some amazing discussion tonight. And I appreciate Sarah, you and Pete, and if anybody has any questions, just send them to me and I can always get them to Pete and Sarah. And we'll do these again too. So any feedback you have, just send to me. And thank you guys. This is a little bit longer than we normally do. Thanks for hanging in there. I really appreciate it.
Sorry for being long-winded.
You're fine.
Great.